Thanks for tuning into the trade setup with me, Niraj Shah, and it looks like a steady state of cues from the world markets. Remember, whole conversation is around Donald Trump. The Economist now gives a 53% chance for Donald Trump to come back to power. In fact, Citi has a note today which asks whether the Trump trade has already been priced in. It's almost a given that Donald Trump is coming back to power. Now, is it having an impact on the markets? Well, not really. Flattish kind of a move, and Nasdaq was up a percent, that's okay. But Dow was down about a third of a percent, up about 0.2%, the futures currently. Asia is mixed, if you will, but Nikkei is up about a percent, and Shanghai is flat. ASX, Kospi, etc. also looking mixed. Our markets bobbing between the red and the green. I wouldn't give too much of importance to this because what the markets do during the course of the day is materially different from how we are starting off these days. So what's the trade setup for the day looking like? I mean, oil drifting lower continues to be a big tailwind for the markets and the economy. Yesterday too, after a 7% drop the previous day, 6% drop the previous day, a bit drift lower, which is great news from an Indian macro watcher's perspective because it helps the CAD position, it helps the multiples for the markets as well. This is a big tailwind you have to keep in mind. Banks are performing on expected lines and may continue higher. Remember, we spoke about this 2 or 3 days ago, and frankly, a divergence between the Bank Nifty and the Nifty might well continue with the Bank Nifty now outperforming. But yesterday was a big sign of the banks doing well. But the only caveat that out here is, yesterday PSU banks also did really well for themselves. I don't know how well or how much longer can PSU banks continue outperforming frontline private sector banks, because almost everybody is on the side of buying into private sector banks, large private sector banks. That is not to say exceptions won't happen, an SBI won't happen, a federal bank won't happen. Those may happen, but effectively people still believe large cap private sector banks are the ones to watch out for. The other thing is the result-led moves, and we're now starting to see large moves on the back of results coming in on the positive side. We were seeing stocks getting slam dunked the last few days, polycabs, etc. of the world. Look at Sirma SGS, 2 days on a trot. Yesterday was up 15%, day before yesterday 14%. Anup Engineering yesterday 15% after a positive move in the last few days. Ami Organics 12.5% to yesterday's result reaction. Gillette up 10%, Federal Bank up 8.66%. So a lot of mid-sized names are moving very strongly on good results, which is actually a big positive to my mind as well. Let's think of stocks then which might move today, right? So okay, Torrent Pharma is a separate kettle of fish. By the way, it will not move on results, but there's a block deal, an OFS of 83 lakh shares at about 3022, which is about a 6% discount to the price. But remember, it's a very steady stock, hasn't quite corrected in the recent correction. If this gets absorbed well, might actually see a bit of a bounce too. So bear that in mind. Now, the stocks that might react positively, Allied Blenders. Revenues up 1.99%, which is okay. Remember, the tailwinds from Andhra Pradesh haven't quite kicked in as yet. This will improve what has already improved. EBITDA margins, 352 basis points higher at 11.86 versus 8.34. And below the EBITDA line, interest expense has come off materially, and as a result of which the net profit is up 318%. This is without sales growth. And one would reckon sales growth will happen because of Andhra Pradesh. I would reckon this will have a strong reaction today. Watch out for Allied Blenders in the session. Hitachi Energy, 26% uptick in revenues, margins expand, bottom line expands meaningfully, 7.1 versus 5.3 margins, and bottom line too expands meaningfully, 52 crores versus 25 crores. May have a further reaction in the session today, so watch out for this one too. Let's move to Voltas. Revenues up 2619 versus 2664. You could argue largely in line with estimates. Margins in line with estimates. Bottom line too, very strong bottom line number. But in line with estimates, so just bear this in mind. Very strong quarter, but it is in line with estimates. However, can't take away the fact that it's done well. The thing about Marico though is different. Marico has done well, and let's run the numbers. It's almost all numbers are in line with estimates, so no big shakeups there. Bottom line slightly higher, if you will, than estimated as well. But the point is, they have spoken very well about the quarters ahead, the volume growth number, the sales growth number, and most brokerages therefore have given a thumbs up to Marico on the growth outlook. So bear this in mind that Marico could be one that should be on mind, may do well. Keynes, exactly in line with estimates, but a very strong quarter, 58% uptick in revenues, I think over a 70% uptick in PAT, margins expanding a little bit as well. So in line with estimates, expensive stock, but has delivered, 87% uptick in net profit, but in line with estimates. So therefore, don't quite know how big a reaction we will see. Websol, I don't quite never know now how to look at this one, but it's a very strong quarter. Revenues up, EBITDA margin versus an EBITDA loss, or EBITDA versus an EBITDA loss, net profit versus a versus a net loss last quarter. So has done very well. Let's see if this one reacts. But standard disclaimer, don't know too much about this company, so can't really quite comment on how strong or how weak relative to estimates is. HCC, revenues were down, but margins and PAT did really well. So that's the point about this one, that it's done well on the bottom line front, exceptionally well because of a low base. Let's see if there is a bit of a reaction on this one. Moti Sons Jewelers too had a decent quarter on all counts, revenues, EBITDA, PAT, so may likely react a little bit in the session today. Do watch out for this one as well. Now, lastly, Ask Automotive, good margin expansion at a point of time when auto sector has been taken to the cleaners. It's good to see some auto ancillaries doing well. Force Motors also I think did well, but this is Ask Automotive, EBITDA margin at 12% versus 9.4%, and the bottom line therefore expanded a little bit better, 63% uptick, 67 crores versus 41 crores, may react positively in the session today, so do watch out for this one. Now, let's talk about some negatives, if you will. Let's move on to Honeywell, the first one on my list. Not a good set of numbers, revenues down 7.25% at 1,024 crores, below estimates. Margins well and truly below estimates, 12.58 versus 15.8 expectation. Net profit down 5.73% at 115 crores. The estimates were 161 crores. These are expensive stocks. They need to deliver every quarter. This one hasn't. Very likely will react negatively. Sheela Foam, another expensive stock, by the way. Revenues were okay, but margins were a bit of a disappointment, as a result of which net profit numbers also cracked. 8.4 versus 10 point something, and net profit as a result down 79% at 9 crores versus 44 crores. Not a good quarter, very likely will react. Star Health too, mixed quarter, right? So net premium was up 16%, but post that, it was very, very weak. Brokerages have sounded off a bugle of caution on these numbers as well. Very likely will react negatively. So watch out for this one too in the session today. What else? Let's get in Lakshmi Organics. Here I'm a bit confused because revenues up 18% at 771. The estimates were 727. Margins expand 9.7 versus 5.9. So very strong quarter, but below estimates. And then net profit again. Look at that. Very strong quarter, 28 crores versus 10.7 crores, but below estimates. So not quite sure how this one will react as well. So that's the long and short of what the stocks should be on your radar today. Expect some very strong reactions on the losers and the gainers. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a great festive season.